Hi, and welcome to our session on SQL scripting and SQL data access made easy. We'll spend about 30 minutes together on the webinar, and we should have some time for questions at the end. So as I'm going along and presenting, if you think of a question or something that I'm not clear on, please don't hesitate to type in a question. If at the end I don't have time to get to all of them, we will certainly follow up this afternoon with your questions. I'm Cheryl Quinlan, and I'll be presenting today, and I'm the manager of the SQL and Showcase support teams here at Help Systems. And I've been using SQL for quite some time, and I always get great pleasure in trying to teach new concepts to folks about SQL. Our topic today is scripting, and maybe some of you have used it, and maybe some of you have not. And what I hope to do today is, if you haven't created a script, is to get you to create one. And for those of you who are familiar with scripts, I hope I'm able to show you some additional tips through some examples. Scripts add a lot of power to your requests by making complex or multi-step tasks run in a single click or a single command. Part of why scripts are so useful is their accessibility and viewpoint. The graphical interface makes creating them easy and puts them in the user environment to run. And they can also be run from the SQL web interface at a browser. You may have heard the term script view and just thought we were confused. Script views are an additional SQL object, and we'll define the difference between script and script views today. We'll also go through some specific examples about combining data from different data sources, conditional logic, and looping. Scripts can solve a lot of problems, but the single most popular reason to create a script is the need for a work file. When you need to extract data and then run a view or report over that subset of the data, scripts allow this task to happen in a single click or a single command string. They can even be used in a dashboard to have the dashboard run over a work file. Scripts make this process seamless to the dashboard. Combining data from multiple data sources would be tedious and manual if it couldn't be done in a script. And with a script view, the request becomes even more dynamic. Scripts have much of the same power as CL, like conditional logic, looping through a process, but with a graphical interface. And the truth be told, you can create and run scripts from the green screen too, if that's your preference. Here's an example of a straightforward script that creates a work file and then runs the view using the data from the work file to email the Excel results. We've taken just two commands and interspersed comment lines in the script, and the comments are very useful in the script to, when you have to step away from it and then come back to it months later to remind you what the flow of the logic is in the script. On line 2, we have a straightforward execute command that runs a view and then builds a file on the IBM. Line 4 is the second command, and it's again another execute because we want to use the data that we just brought over in our work lib, create a view over that, but email the results as XLS. One of my favorite parts about designing a script and run in Viewpoint is the ease at which you can create a comment. There's just a button on the toolbar that allows you to comment or uncomment a line. And honestly, this way I never have to remember which way the slash and asterisk go, and it's a lot easier than typing it and then going to the end of the line and typing it. You can even prompt inside of Viewpoint Script Designer to fill in the necessary parameters of a command. Or if you aren't familiar with the command names, you can actually start with an object, view or report, and then Viewpoint will automatically prompt you for the appropriate commands that could work with that object type. Now, what is a script view? When they first came out and I was trying to wrap my head around what they did, someone said they're a script that acts like a view. And I heard a wise grammar school teacher I had once in my head saying, don't define a word using the word. But then I finally got it. Script views combine the multi-step processing of a script with the output capabilities of a view, which means the user can decide at runtime how they want to process the script view. They can display it, send the results to an email in Excel, and so on. And when they do display the results at the browser that require a multi-step process, the script view will make the results look better than just a plain old script. With a script, you have just one option. You get to run it. Now, you can pick whether you want to run it interactively or in batch, but you still just get to run it. If we take a look at Viewpoint and the options associated with both a script and a script view, you'll see that we're right-clicking here on just a plain old script. And again, we get the options to either run it or submit it. But if you take a look, when you right-click on a script view, you'll notice that this dialog box is identical to when you run a view, and you have all of those same output options. So this gives the user flexibility at runtime to decide how they want to work with the results, whether they want to see them with a display, save them as a file to the IFS or to their PC, or email them, or even print them. And that's what the beauty of the script view is. We're going to dive into our first example where we combine data from multiple data sources. We'll look at it two ways, first with a script and then with a script view. So I know all of you have data really kind of all over the place. We no longer have the luxury of just having our data on the IBM I. You might have SQL servers, Oracle, who knows what you've got out there. And if you need to ever compare the data when it's on different servers, whether it's comparing it, joining it, or merging it together, like with a union, you've got to get that data on the same server. We cannot query data that is on different servers. And the best way to do that is inside of a script view. Now, the first step is to bring the data to a location. In my example here, I've got data sitting on an SQL Server database, and I also have a file over on the IBM I, and I need to join those together to complete my request. My first execute statement in the script is going to go out to that SQL Server database. In my case, it's named Able Corp, and so I just fill in that server parameter on the execute command. And I'm using just a quick SQL statement because I want to select all the fields, all the records from the cusmas file over there. And I bring them back here, back locally to the IBM I in an out file in qtemp that I create. I can then use that file in my script, and it remains a script because the next command is a display. And I'm picking on my select clause both fields from the work file I just brought over, as well as a file that's on the IBM I. I'm going to join it together, and then I can display this. So when I run this script, I get a display. The problem is if sometimes you want to display, but sometimes you might want to email those results. If you kept it as a script, you would have to create two different scripts with different commands at the end there. And that's the beauty of a script view, and it's a very subtle difference. The only difference is the last command in the script view becomes an SC return. This is a SQL command, and what that allows us to do is to be dynamic in the run options at runtime. And that's what we mean by it's a script that acts like a view. And it's that SC return that turns your script into a script view and gives you, in Viewpoint or wherever you run this request from, the options just like a view. If you take a look at a Viewpoint Explorer list under type, you'll see that we do make a distinction between script views and scripts. They do have a slightly different type. And just so you know, the P at the end means there's prompts or variables in that script. Okay, our next example is going to take us into conditional logic. And we have two different examples for conditional logic. Okay, the first one is an example where we want to do something different based upon the number of records that are retrieved. So if the request returns no records, we want to do one thing. If it has records, we want to do a different thing. And we can do that in the scope of a script using the condition SQL command, which is a very straightforward command that will query a file, and we're kind of hard coding it, so we return a 1 if there's records and not a 1 if there are no records. The first thing we have to do is take our view that is our control that determines if there's records, what we do. And we take that, and in this case, that's our execute on that first line, and we take it, view 1, and we say, run this and build a file. And the reason I need to do that is because I need to run my condition SQL over that file. And so then I start my conditional logic, and I say, if the condition SQL selects a 1 from my file in QTemp, well, then I'm going to display view 2. And then I have my else, which means, okay, if that condition SQL wasn't true, then I'm going to display view 3. So I'm only going to run view 2 if there's records, and I'm going to run view 3 when there aren't records. With an if statement inside of a script, you do have to end it with an end if. So that's pretty straightforward. And it's the beauty of that condition SQL that allows us to easily determine if there's records or not. Sometimes you need to do conditional logic based upon what your user keys in. And I'm really excited about this example because we actually had a customer call in this week, and they had their script practically created, the bow was on it, and they were just missing a couple of quotes. So it was using this exact same concept. So I'm very excited to share this with you because it does seem like it's a very useful tool to have in your toolbox. In our example here, we're going to prompt the user for a couple things. We want to know whether or not they want a detail report, and we're going to ask them, would you like a detail report? And they're going to either answer yes or no. We're going to make our prompt airtight so that they can only key in a Y or an N. We're not going to let them key in every letter of the alphabet, and that's pretty straightforward to do as well on any prompt within SQL. Then, if they say they want a detail report, we're going to run the detail report with a date range that they've provided. If they don't want a detail report, we're going to run the summary level report with the same date range. But we're going to prompt them up front for the question about detail or not and the date range. So it's very easy to take a date range and to pass it to multiple commands inside of a script so that you don't have to continually reprompt the user for the same dates. So what we do here, again, it's an if that's kind of sandwiched in between an if and an end if. And what we say this time is condition. And we're comparing a variable that the user provides against a constant. So the ampersand U1 is a variable that we've defined on the variable tab in the script. And if that is an N, meaning they don't want a detail report, we're going to run that first report, which is just really a summary level report with the date range that the user provided. This is an old, now I want to say old, but a very trusty host report. And we put out Q* none just in case it's run at a command line or in the green screen environment or even from viewpoint, because it will delete the spool file when it's done. Then we say else, run this other report. Same date range, they're named very similarly, different by one letter, using the same date range, and then we do the end if. Now let me explain on this condition statement with this variable what's going on there, because it looks like I've got way too much going on. And the variable name is just ampersand U1. And again, that will either be a Y or an N. Because that is a character constant, we need to ensure that that is enclosed in quotes within our script. When we enclose a variable in quotes in the script, we use 2 ampersands because the 2 ampersands in a quoted string ensure substitution. And so basically when this runs, it's either saying n equals n, or it's going to say y equals n, and we're going to know whether it's true or not, and whether we jump to the else clause or not. All right, so that is conditional logic. Our next topic takes us into a do loop. Now, a do loop, I like to think of it as the dinner guest that wouldn't leave. You have to tell the do loop to leave and to end at some point. The do loop, of course, will process statements continuously. And like I said, you have to tell us to exit and to force the leave. And then you have to have the end do to exit the loop in order for the script to run. We're going to take a look at one of these. Now, depending upon, I'm not sure if everyone has the same example to want to process something repetitively, so I kind of made just a generic example, because what we're learning here is the concept here. And one time, I know times when we have used this is if someone wants to check to see if there's a file out on the IFS, and they don't know what time of day that file is going to hit the IFS, but we need to go out there, check, and then once the file is there, we've got to do something. Maybe we have to pick it up in email. And so one way to utilize a do loop with an if statement like this is to say, okay, check on the IFS. If the file is there, then go and email it. Otherwise, do a delay job type of request. What makes this example so interesting is that we have 2 different types of variables. We have the kind of variable you're all probably familiar with, and a prompted script variable, and that's our ampersand NBR. And that's the variable that you define on the variable tab of the script. And this for us is going to define how many times do we want to loop. We could have hard-coded that, but we're going to ask the user at runtime. The other type of variable is an internal script variable, and that's our ampersand CNT, our count. The reason why that's internal is you won't see it on the variable tab if you're in the script designer. The user will not see a prompt for ampersand CNT when they go to run this request. This variable is defined very similarly the way you would in a CL program by doing a declare. And that's what line 1 does, is it declares the internal variable inside of the script. And it's just a decimal 3, 0. We only expect some kind of number, an incremental count to happen. And then we use that variable, that ampersand count, later on in the script, and we actually change its value there on line 6. What we're doing is the user is providing a value for ampersand number. And let's just say they said 10. I want to run this thing 10 times. We do a comparison to make sure our counter that keeps track of how many times we've run this is less than 10. The moment it becomes over 10, we end up doing something else. So taking this kind of from the top, we declare our variable. Then we start our do loop. And on line 3, when I say do something here, that's the command that you want us to repeat running. Then we have our if condition that says, okay, is our counter, how many times we've done this request, less than how many times we want to do this request, the number provided from the user. If it is, we do some type of work, we do something. Then we increment the counter on the change of our command. And we're just incrementing it by 1. And the reason why we don't need to have quotes all over the place around these variables is because they're numbers. They're not character strings like in the previous example. When we finally run this thing, 10 times, we get to the point where line 4 is not going to be true anymore, where the count is going to be more than the number of times we want to run this. And that's where we drop out of the if and we go to the line 7, which is the else. And then we go down to line 8 because else, if it's not true, we want to leave. And not only do we want to leave at line 9, we want to end the if. And not only do we want to end the if, we want to end the do at line 10. And each of those are separate commands available inside the script within SQL. Hopefully that mouthful made sense. I feel like I went through these examples pretty quickly. I haven't seen any questions pop up yet, but that's the next part of this nice quick webinar that we have. And the good thing I can tell you is all of these examples, believe it or not, exist in the SQL EX library that installs on your system. And if you wanted to go out and look at these examples or even save yourself some typing and kind of borrow from those examples, you're free to do that. So I'm going to open up the floor to any questions that you have. I'll give you a minute in case you're trying to find the question box in the GoToWebinar. You will be sent this recording as a thank you, I guess, for attending. If you want to share it with a colleague or listen to it again. We do get a lot of questions about variables and the quoting and how to use the set var. We actually have a really good KBA out on our portal that does point you to kind of the rules for that, because there are some rules which make it a little easier. I'm not seeing a lot of questions pop up. What I want to do is, and maybe it's because we're getting close to lunchtime, or it is your lunchtime. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I love hearing from all of you, the customers, and what I'm particularly interested in is, are there topics that you would like us to include in these webinars? My email is listed there at the end, and we're very open to suggestions. And I would encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions or ideas. And our support team is always here to help you. And they can be reached at support.sql@helpsystems.com. That community portal where I mentioned that KBA is at community.helpsystems.com. And of course, we're always here by phone or to help you as well. I want to thank you so much for joining me. And hopefully this was a useful snippet of your day. And I hope your day goes well. And if you're in where the snow is coming, that hopefully your weather won't be too terrible today. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.